What if I told you that ancient Romans used urine as mouthwash, or that the French aristocracy of Versailles drowned themselves in perfume instead of taking baths? Hygiene throughout history has been a strange, messy, and downright shocking journey, and humans have tried everything from clever to gross to stay clean or at least smell decent. Today, we're going to cover every bit of hygiene that humans have been practicing throughout history. So you better be ready because it's going to be pretty shocking. The Roman Empire. When you think of ancient Rome, grand bathhouses probably come to mind, and for good reason. Romans took their bathing seriously, but it was a fairly public affair. They believed that scraping off dirt and sweat with a curved metal tool called a strigil was just as effective as soap. And yes, they shared these tools. Speaking of sharing, after doing their business in the very communal public toilets, they used sponges on sticks called tersorium for wiping. The Romans weren't just bathing enthusiasts, they were early recyclers. Human and animal urine, which we know is rich in ammonia, was collected in pots on the streets and from public toilets. They even washed clothes with it, because apparently smelling like yesterday's chamber pot was a small price to pay for a bright tunic. Oh, and teeth whitening? You guessed it, urine was their go-to toothpaste. What a multi-purpose liquid. Despite the strange practices, the Romans were ahead of their time in valuing cleanliness because the Black Plague era was a grimly different picture of hygiene. The Black Plague. During the 14th century, hygiene took a literal nosedive straight into superstition and chaos. The severity of the Black Plague is a reminder of just how bad the cleanliness was. I mean, it wiped off 1/3 of the European population from 1346 to 1353. Unfortunately, their solutions for staying clean were as wild as the disease itself. Bathing was blamed for opening the pores that could allow disease to creep in. So naturally, everyone kept bathing to a minimum. Imagine millions of unwashed bodies covered in layers of dirt, sweat, and plague. Delightful. To fight off the miasma, which was the bad air believed to carry disease, people used pomanders, which were small scented balls of herbs and spices to mask that awful stench. Spoiler alert, it didn't help. Some even rubbed raw onions or vinegar on their skin, thinking it would ward off infection. The best part? Plague doctors with their creepy bird-like masks were actually filling those beaks with herbs, hoping to avoid the stench and the sickness. And what they did to treat the ill patients did more to spread the disease than to cure it. I mean, the doctors would cut open the swollen lymph nodes called buboes to let the pus leave the body. Then apply a mixture of plant roots, resin, and well, dried feces. Well, all that effort just went straight down the drain. I have a whole video on the Black Plague on my channel, so if you want to know more, just click the link in the description below. The Court of Versailles. Leaving behind the plague-ridden Middle Ages, let's step into the extravagance of 17th and 18th century France, where the French aristocracy may have perfected the art of indulgence. But hygiene? Not so much. In fact, King Louis XIV famously bathed just once a year, and some courtiers believe that washing too often could weaken the body. Instead of baths, they turned to perfume. The court was practically drowning in it, covering every inch of their unwashed bodies with scent strong enough to knock out a horse. And bathrooms? Not a chance. When nature called, courtiers used chamber pots, or worse, just relieved themselves in the palace corridors. Imagine wading through the gold-trimmed halls of Versailles while avoiding suspicious puddles or excrement. Even with their powdered wigs and lavish garments, they couldn't escape the stench of filth. Versailles may have been glamorous, but beneath the surface, it was less luxury and more eau de decay. From powdered wigs to powdered gunfire, hygiene took a hard turn during the American Civil War from 1861 to 1865. But before I dive into what soldiers had to endure back then, don't let these dirty hygiene secrets stay hidden. Hit the like button and subscribe for more weird history. It really helps me reach more curious minds like yours. Thanks for your support. Now let's jump back in. Civil War armies. Soldiers on both sides faced brutal conditions where survival meant more than staying clean. Their living spaces were disgusting and always covered in dirt and filth, and taking a bath was as infrequent as a full moon. Only if you were lucky enough to find a river. And even then, good luck keeping it sanitary when hundreds of soldiers used the same water source for, well, everything. Their uniforms, worn for weeks or months without washing, became breeding grounds for lice and disease. There were other pests too, like mosquitoes and bugs, and constant exposure meant diseases like malaria, cholera, and typhoid. Around 1/3 of those poor Confederate soldiers had to go barefoot due to a lack of adequate footwear. And forget about clean wounds. Field hospitals were infamous for reusing bandages and surgical tools without washing. Unsurprisingly, infections and disease killed more soldiers than actual battles. The Wild West. Now let's move from the damp and swampy battlefield to the very dusty Wild West. Water was a rare commodity for those folks, especially in the arid regions, so bathing often fell to the bottom of the to-do list. Many settlers and cowboys went weeks without washing, and when they did bathe, it was usually in the same murky, reused water shared by the whole household or the entire camp. The bars and pubs had a series of towels hanging along the counters, and patrons would wipe their beer-drenched beards with them. And no, the towels kept hanging there for the next customer for God knows how long, instead of getting into the washing load. Outhouses, if they existed, were rudimentary, often little more than a hole in the ground surrounded by wooden planks and some unwanted bugs and spiders. The only available toilet paper alternatives were leaves, grass, or corn cobs. Ouch! The bedding was another issue because it was mostly filled with hay and hardly changed. This was perfect for all kinds of lice and other things you wouldn't like to share your bed with. As for brushing teeth, many settlers used crushed charcoal, baking soda, or even a frayed twig to scrub their teeth. Mouthwash? That was just whiskey, which doubled as a disinfectant and drink. The Victorian Era. As the Wild West wrestled with dust and dirt, the Victorian era from 1837 to 1901 brought millions into overcrowded cities where clean water and sanitation were often an afterthought. Open sewers ran through streets, and diseases like cholera thrived. In fact, it was the infamous Great Stink of the year 1858, a record-breaking hot summer where the Thames River reeked so badly it disrupted Parliament in London that finally pushed Britain to improve sanitation systems. I mean, the hot weather exposed the sewage that had been caked into the river's banks. The smell was so bad that it caused people miles away to throw up when the wind changed. Victorians had an evolving relationship with cleanliness. Public bathhouses became common in cities, and indoor plumbing slowly gained popularity among the wealthy. However, most working-class families shared a single tin tub, often filled with cold water that everyone in the household reused. Baths were infrequent, and laundry days were even rarer due to the labor-intensive process of boiling water and scrubbing by hand. Victorian women had their own hygiene struggles. Tight corsets trapped sweat and dirt, and layers of heavy dresses made regular washing impossible. If somebody had a bad tooth, they had a good chance that no dentists were available in the area, so instead, they went to the barber or blacksmith who would pull out the problem-causing menace once and for all. Not long after the Victorian era, humanity decided to prove its modernity by building the Titanic, which was supposedly unsinkable. The Titanic. The Titanic was the epitome of class divides, even in hygiene. Before boarding, third-class passengers underwent thorough health inspections to check for lice and disease, while the first-class passengers enjoyed private bathrooms and Turkish baths. Below deck, the less fortunate travelers would share communal facilities, and passengers had just 2 bathtubs for over 700 people. That's right, folks, but unlike the first-class passengers, they were provided with automatic flushing toilets. Why? Only because they might not know how to flush a regular manual one. It was a genius move to avoid the chaos of, well, overflowing situations. The International Space Station. Okay, so that's enough about the hygiene here on Earth. What do astronauts do to keep clean? In space, Hygiene is a science because, without good old gravity, even basic tasks feel alien. Astronauts have to use rinseless wipes to clean their bodies, no rinse shampoo for hair, and swallow toothpaste after brushing. Water is recycled from urine and sweat, while high-tech toilets use suction to manage waste. Waste from the ISS is then placed into an unpiloted ship and expelled into space, and it is ultimately burned up upon entering the Earth's atmosphere, turning into harmless vapor. Of course, we all hope it doesn't land on any unsuspecting picnic goers. And there you have it. I hope you didn't find the hygiene practices too disturbing, because to be honest, some of them really are. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.